U.S. food recalls are up 400%, and shoppers say they can't grocery shop in peace. All right, shalom, shalom. I'm gonna ride y'all coming at you with another lesson straight out of the Lion's Den Camp of Yashala. But before I get started with this lesson, I would like to give all praise to the Heavenly Father in the name of His only begotten Son in their proper true names. We're gonna start off by saying, Call, Halayim, La, Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Ha, Rekah Kodash, Ma'amaf. Definitely want to give double honors to the elder apostles of GMS and their elders. Definitely want to give double honors to my elder apostle, Ahar One, on Yashala of the Lion's Den Camp, located right here in Jacksonville, Florida. Shalom to the rest of the Lion's Den Camp and the sincere men, women, and children that believe in sincerity and truth and that believe in the names of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shah. All right, Shalom. Today's lesson is going to be another Lion's Den news, all right, and prophecy. All right, it's been a lot of stuff going on within this month. Really, this whole year, 2026 has been a banger. All right, but this particular lesson is going to be about the plagues and pestilence that the Lord is sending upon the earth, man. There's things to be watchful for, right? But to also have your mind set on Yahweh Bashim Yahushua, because He's the only way to get through these perilous times, man. All right. This article here says food recalled in 2026: beef, lettuce, jalapenos, and more. All right, I recommend to you might want to go, especially school that started, so for your kids, for yourself, for your loved ones, to check out the things that are being recalled. All right, so that way your family will be okay. All right, things to watch for, you feel me? All right, so just to kind of quickly go over this article, because there's a lot of stuff I want to touch base on, and I'm not sure how long this video is going to last due to my storage. All right, so let's get it. All right, it says shortly after lettuce was recalled linked to a cyclosporus outbreak, and I know I chopped that up. All right, forgive me for that. All right, it says beef was recalled for another reason. All right, food recalls have continued throughout 2026, with federal agencies warning consumers about potentially contaminated beef. All right, now if you been paying attention, all right, a couple of days ago, Trump announced that he was getting beef imported in. All right, because of the issues that's been going on with the contaminations. All right, but it says with federal agencies warning consumers about potentially contaminated beef, lettuce, jalapenos, eggs, nut butter, noodles, and other food products. Some of the year's most significant recalls have included foodborne pathogens, including Salmonella, E. coli, and Cyclospora. All right, Salakia. It says while other recalls have been issued because of uncleared allergens, Salakia, or other safety concerns. It says several recent recalls have also affected popular grocery stores and prepared foods sold nationwide. All right. Right, so it says because of undeclared allergens or other safety concerns. All right, remember that. It says here's a list of the most major food recalls so far this year. All right, lettuce recall. All right, there's another one. There's a few more. All right, I'm not going to read all of this. All right, but beef has been recalled. All right, this happened in August 7th. All right. I'll read a little bit of this. It says beef has also been the subject of several 2026 recalls and public health alerts. One recent recall involves Corte, all right, Argentino, USA, which recalled approximately 29,628 pounds of raw beef produced on August 7, 2026 in the USDA. It's like the USDA said the products were imported without the benefit of required federal inspection. All right. Another major beef-related recall announced in August involved City Foods Inc., all right, which recalled approximately 3,215 pounds of ready-to-eat pastrami and beef and corned beef products because of possible contamination with listeria. All right. So just a few things to watch out for dealing with the beef. All right. Me personally, I would just stay away from beef as a whole, but is most of this stuff ended up in places like Costco, Walmart. When you buying beef in bulk, all right, or from major companies, all right. But Costco's, Walmart. It's been plenty of videos out on this. You probably have seen already, all right. But that's just to name a couple. But it's a lot more other places, all right. It says jalapenos recalled, all right. Just to kind of read out a couple, right? Eggs recalled. This was in July through August, right? Pistachio nut butter recalled. Noodle recalled. So on and so on. Green powder recalled. All right, but blueberry recalled. I believe this is mostly in Publix, if I'm not mistaken. It says frozen blueberries became one of the year's most serious produce scares after an E. coli outbreak was traced to fruit sold at Publix. All right, so just a heads up on that. All right, let's go. I had another article I wanted to get into. I had a few, but I'm not going to grab all these. All right, dealing with Trump and the beef and how farmers are upset, man. And all this is happening right, during the midterm elections. So I grabbed this one real quick. This one says Republican ranchers in Congress urge Trump to put American ranchers first. President Donald Trump announced a new deal to address the rising cost of beef. Right? It says support American ranchers and rebuild the smallest herd in modern history. Republican members of Congress are now criticizing Friday's announcement, calling it a temporary solution that could hurt American ranchers in the long run. All right, quote, for the next 90 days, the United States will allow up to 300,000 metric tons of product for ground beef to be imported with no out of quota tariff, Trump wrote on Truth Social. Quote, we have commitment that this beef, right? It says that this beef will be sold at 25% below current market prices. This deal will reduce prices for Americans while giving space for our great American beef herd to grow again, he continued. Trump did not immediately share which countries have been selected to provide the beef. Quote, I don't want to say which countries, but there are a few, he originally told reporters, but later mentioned Argentina as one, right? And man, if you haven't been watching the Olympics, during the soccer games, right? You should know the mindset of those people, man. All right, if you've been paying attention to Argentina. All right, but it says Trump did not immediately share. I'm gonna just drop back to where I was. It says, but there are a few, end quote. It says he originally told reporters, but later mentioned Argentina as one. It is unclear how the savings will be passed on to consumers, but the White House said an executive order which more details is expected in the next 2 weeks. The U.S. cattle herd is at its lowest in 70 years, causing beef prices to rise significantly, right? And not only that, right? But we just had all these recalls on beef, which makes things even worse. All right, so we got the beef recalls, and now we have, where we already were struggling, dealing with the lowest, right? It says the U.S. cattle herd is at its lowest in 70 years, causing beef prices to rise significantly, right? Because and this is why you're starting to get all this, allegedly processed meats, 3D printed meats, fake meats, that's been found in these grocery stores. There's been a lot of videos coming out about the meats that we are buying out of the grocery stores, especially places like Aldi's, right? And Aldi's is supplied by a certain country that has a place like the Aldi's that's by my house. All right, just to give an example, they get their meat from. Dang, I don't even know if I can say it, but they get their meat from a place down in Orlando, from Jewish people, the Jewish company. All right, just to put it out there, allegedly. All right, well, I can't even say allegedly. I read the back of the package. It's actually on the package where it says it gets meat from. But allegedly, these are not good meats. These are allegedly, fake meat. All right, so just to kind of give more warning to this, man. But the Lord said what? All right, let's grab some precepts real quick before I go back to that. All right, about dealing with just how low allegedly how low our herd cattle is right now. Let's go to let's go to Ezekiel. All right, I'm gonna just jump right to it. Let's see. Where is it at? It's gotta be further down. All right, this is Ezekiel 4 in chapter 13. All right, because the Negroes and Latinos and Native Americans are the true Israelites of the scripture, as well as the Seminole Indians. All right, and the speckled bird. That's the speckled bird goes into nations that, Israelites that may look like the nations they was raised in, or may look like other nations, but their bloodline goes back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right, and down to the 12 tribes. All right, this is Ezekiel 4 and 13. And Yahweh said, even thus shall the children of Israel eat their defiled bread among the Gentiles. Right, and we're among the Gentiles today, man. When they came and took over the land of the northern kingdom that was over here already prospering. All right, and now we're eating our food defiled, man. because of Esau's blessing, right? Their wickedness, and how they went around conquering with the sword, man. All right, you see what they did to the buffaloes just to try to kill off our brothers and sisters, right? The Seminole Indians, the Cherokees, and so on and so on. All right, but it says whether I would drive them, right? Where were we driven? Right here to America, man. We've been spread out to all four corners of the earth, man, north, east, south, and west around this beautiful globe, man. And at the end of the day, all of us are eating our food defiled amongst the Gentiles, man. It's just here in Babylon, it's the worst. All right, as food, cattle begin to become more scarce and scarce, right? So they can bring in their, allegedly they can bring in their new forms of food. All right, 3D printed meats, highly processed meats, fake meats, so on and so on. All right, let's go to. You really could get that, but this really is going into something else, man. This is really like eating your food, with a ruler, but ultimately, we're eating it with the Gentiles, man. And who's in charge? The wicked, man. This is Proverbs 23:1. It says, when thou sittest to eat with a ruler, consider diligently what is before thee, man. And I'm just bringing this out, man, because you have to understand, even though we're not physically sitting down with this ruler, right, but we eat out of this ruler's hand, man, because they have control over all our food unless you're growing your food and yourself, and you have a herd of animals at your house. If you're not doing that, you're basically, but again, it's part of the curses, man, that, we have to go to them for everything, right? So, at the end of the day, we're basically eating right out of his hand, man, but there's ways around it. Again, you can grow your own fruits and vegetables, your own foods, all right, but that's a everyday process, man. That's not, if you have a 9 to 5, you're not gonna be able to do that. It's possible, but you'll be tired. You got to take care of your own animals. You have to have somebody to watch your animals, all that, etc., etc. It's a lot of work to be a farmer or to live off the land. All right, it says verse 2, and put a knife to thy throat, right? Right, so let me finish verse 1. When thou sittest to eat with a ruler, consider diligently what is before thee, right? Pay attention to what you're being fed, man. It says, and put a knife to thy throat, if thou be a man given to appetite, right? If you can't physically control yourself, man, when you're hearing information about certain recalls, have the strength to say, man, look, I'm just not going to eat this for a little while. These particular items, man. Clearly there's something going on, but, again, these are plagues that coming from the Lord, man. Rather that's him physically putting it on the earth, or him making Esau do it. Either way it goes, it's part of prophecy, man. It says, be not desirous of his dainties, man, right? Which means desirous. So be not desirous of his dainties. Let me move this up, man, so I can see it. All right, be not desirous of his dainties, for they are deceitful meats, right? As we was just going over the alleged 3D printed meats and the alleged fake meats, right? All And don't desire these things. You know, have the mindset of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, continue in that spirit and lean on that, man. That's what's gonna feed you and lead you to the proper substances. You know. All right. So let's see. I got that one. Just delete these ones I got. All right. Right. This is 1 Timothy. I should have grabbed this one first. This is 1 Timothy 4:1. It says, "Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times, some shall depart from faith and give heed to seducing spirits." That's not what I needed. Perilous times is what I needed. But that's even true too. All right. Where is that at? Let me see. Okay, at the top, so lucky. Oh, you know what? Slacky. Let me grab it from here. We'll come back to that one. All right, this is I know what I was going into that one, but this is 2 Timothy 3:1. It says, "This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come." Slacky. It's in the wrong chapter. It says, perilous times, and those perilous times that we're in, man. You know, we have to understand that. You know, we're in the days of the Lord visiting the earth, man, and all hell breaking loose. You know, the Jacob's trouble. You know, in the midst. You know, World War III. All the Lord's prophecies coming to pass, man, right before our eyes. All right, let me grab that. This is 2nd Esdras chapter 2. Salaki. This is 2nd Esdras chapter 16. Salaki, and verse. I went too far. Salaki, let me grab it. And verse 17. This verse 18. The beginning of sorrows. Right. Let's jump up 17. Woe is me, woe is me. This is Esdras talking. Who will deliver me in those days? In what days? The days of trouble, man. You know. It says the beginning of sorrows. Right. These days, these sorrowful days, the times of the perilous times that we are in right now. It says the beginning of sorrows and great mournings, the beginning of famine and great death, the beginning of wars, and the powers shall stand in fear. Right. And we're seeing the famine creep up. You know. You know, basically, and you know that inflation, which is, you know, we getting less for our buck. You know, everything's going up in price, and we're getting less and less for it. You know, we see what great unalivings happening, especially with our people. You know, dealing with ropes and trees. It says the beginning of wars. Right, we see the Lord gathering all the nations down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Man, you know, Armageddon, the gathering of troops. You know. Armageddon in Hebrew, right? It says the beginning of wars, right? It says, and the power shall stand in fear, as we're seeing, man. You know, everybody's talking about World War III, nuclear destructions. You know, Iran, they don't want Iran to get nukes, man. You know, everybody's in fear, man. It says the beginning of evils, and that's what we're seeing, man. You know, these perilous times, and Esau has been loose for a little season. You know, and he's going around doing what he's doing the most evil he can because he has but a short bit of time, man. You know, roughly paraphrasing those precepts. It says, the beginning of evils, what shall I do when these evils shall come? Behold, famine, right? Also can be inflation, right? Inflation and plagues, tribulation and anguish are sent as scourges for amendments, man. And this is what we're going through, man. This is the stuff that we're seeing as the Lord is showing us that he is visiting the earth and cranking things up. It's getting hot in here, man. You know? All right, it says, but for all these things, they shall not turn from their wickedness, right? And that's, you know, definitely the wicked, but 2/3 of our people as well, man. You know, no matter how much we tell them what you know, what's coming, they're not going to turn from their wickedness. They're going to continue to eat out of the wicked's hand, man. You know, and follow behind their stupidity, you know, and their evilness, their wickedness, all right? Yep, but for all these things, they shall not turn from their wickedness, nor be always mindful of the scourges. See there? You know, not even considering the prophecies, man. All right, let's go back to the blue letter. All right. All right, this is second. Now we hit 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3. I'm gonna just jump right to it. And I'm gonna read it in NLT. For a time is coming when people will no longer listen to sound and wholesome teachings, man. Right? That's the time period we're in now. No, understanding that, 2/3 just not gonna get it, man. They will follow their own desires and will look for teachers who will teach them right. They walk around with itching ears, man. Telling them whatever. It says they will follow their own desires and will look for teachers who will tell them whatever their itching ears want to hear, man. You see that? They're not trying to listen to the true prophets giving out that true warning, man. All right. But these are things you need to do, for the elect. It says, Exodus 23 and 25, and ye shall serve Yahweh your power, and he shall bless thy bread, and thy water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of thee, man. Reading the NLT, you must serve only Yahweh your power. If you do, I will bless you with food and water, and I will protect you from illness, man. You see that? That's why it's so important to do the job sincerely for Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, man. Because he's going to make sure you eat and keep that sickness, and feed you and give you drink and keep that sickness away from you, man. All right. Got two more, really. Let's hit Matthew. It hit hard. Matthew 6:25. This is Yahweh Shah speaking. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body, what ye shall put on. Right? Don't be thinking about everything that you need. Food, drink, clothes, shoes. Don't be worried about that, man. As long as you're doing the will of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua by going out teaching the elect, doing the thing that's pleasing to the Yahweh, praying, fasting, leading up many back to the marriage, right? You'll be taken care of. It says, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, right? Is not your life more than meat? It says, and the body more than the raiment, right? Than your clothes. It says, behold, the fowls of the air, for they sow not. They do nothing, right? Let's read it in NLT. All right, it says, verse 26. It says, look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, for your heavenly Father feeds them. And aren't you far more valuable to him than they are? Right. So the birds ain't doing nothing, but the Lord taking care of them, man. You know what I'm saying? They gonna eat, they gonna drink. Everything's provided. What more us? You see? Long as, especially if you're doing the will of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, right? You're gonna be taken care of, man. Right. And that one there 5 says, can all in NLT verse 27, can all your worries add a single moment to your life? But in the KJV, it says, which of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit into his stature? Right. Making yourself taller. You can't do that. You can't, so in other words, if Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua is going to feed you and give you drink as long as you're doing the things that are pleasing to him, right? But if you're able to feed yourself and give yourself drink, then by all means do it, all right? We'll wait, because if the Lord want to take it from you, he'll take it from you. If he want to give it to you, he'll give it to you. See that? If he want to give you something that's sickening, that make you ill, he'll do that too. Right, but that's just talking about, verse 27. If you can make yourself taller, then make yourself taller. Like, which you can't do that, unless you have to go through some type of crazy surgery. But you can't just think it and it happens like the Lord does. He thinks things into existence, right? He speaks things into existence. You see that? All right. So, just a little bit more, news and prophecy, man. To be aware of the shortage of the cattle. As well as all of these recalls that's going on, man. The Lord is visiting the earth, man. Sending out these plagues, man. So you have to be diligent, in your studies and your work, so that way you'll be taken care of, man. All right. And again, this is talking about, it's a lot going on with this, because you got the prices finna go up on dealing with the chickens and the beefs and all of this stuff. You got a whole bunch of recalls that's happening. People getting sick. Midterm elections finna hit, where you got the farmers getting upset with Trump, You know, this foreign meat coming in. We're not really knowing where this beef is coming from. All right. So again, man, and this is gonna be in all major stores. I wouldn't even eat at the fast food restaurants either, man. You know, and just think, man, farmers have a lot of control over our food, man. You don't want to piss these people off, you know. But Trump don't care, man. Trump let that motherfucker burn. Well, definitely Nero reincarnate, you know, back in a different type of flesh, man. You know. But again, for those who know, that's Nero reincarnate. Back in the flesh, man. So like it for the background noise, but I'm gonna go ahead and end it there. All right. Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. Shalom and DTA.